Hey folks, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The FCC has now decided that they're going to make, I don't know if they decided this or they are now making the broadband data collection fabric available to additional organizations and entities. What does that mean? Be right back and explain it. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So this came out just a couple of days ago. So you see here, access to Fabric for third-party stakeholders announced. This is on the FCC site. I'll link to this as well as the other things that I'm showing here at the end of the broadcast. I'll put that as a pinned comment in YouTube. So basically here's where you can download the public notice for this. And I will show you what that looks like. So here you see Broadband Data Task Force announces process for stakeholders to license Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric data for use in the broadband data collection. So what this is, well, first, if you're new to this, the Broadband Data Fabric or the Serviceable Location Fabric is something that had to be developed so that we could determine what locations in the United States have broadband, because that was something that we just were not sure about as a country. So we knew some information, and the FCC already had some maps out, but they were not granular enough. They were all based on a census block kind of location. So if you just had one location in a census block that was served, then their map shows everything served. And that's the way that map is today. Well, we need better maps. And the first step is to make sure that we know exactly every location that is supposed to have broadband, and not just every, when I say location, I don't mean just every address, but every structure at an address. So you might have a neighborhood with single-family homes. That's pretty easy, where you say, okay, every one of these homes should have broadband. But then you've got other areas, like maybe rural areas where you've got farms and there are multiple structures that should have broadband, or maybe businesses, multiple structures that should have broadband. So each one of those need to be identified very precisely. So that had to be done, and the FCC contracted out to a company called CostQuest to do that, and CostQuest took lots of different information, including census data, tax information, satellite imagery, to try to come up with this fabric, to the point of actually trying to use artificial intelligence to train their software to actually find the structures on a particular, let's say, tract of land, and determine, based on roof line and some other things, should this have broadband or not. So that was the first attempt at this, and that fabric came out. And then I think it was like at the end of June, and the FCC then granted access to internet service providers who were then going into the fabric and adding in, I think that's when that happened. I might get my dates mixed here, but the service providers went in and then had to overlay on top of the fabric where they actually provide service, their speeds that they provide service at, whether latency meets 100 milliseconds or less round trip. And then those two things together, the fabric and the map, or excuse me, the data from ISPs as to where they serve, will produce the FCC broadband map. But also there were some challenges that were allowed to the fabric. So the fabric itself is just the location data. It's not whether the broadband service is actually there, it's whether there should be broadband service there. And a limited number of organizations were allowed to challenge that, do bulk challenges to say, hey, this is not correct. This is a new neighborhood maybe where there should be broadband service, or these particular structures should not have broadband, or on this tract of land you missed this structure. Those kinds of challenges are what these entities could do, and those basically to this point have been government organizations, state organizations, state, I think community governments, tribal governments could then challenge that, along with the service providers. So the internet service providers could also challenge that fabric data, because they were the ones that were most looking at that data, because they had to upload their areas that they actually serve. So as they were looking at this fabric, they were finding lots of areas where it was like, well, wait a minute, this says this has all these locations missing that we provide service, or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe you're saying there should be service at these locations, but these are not structures that should have broadband, as far as we know. So those are the kinds of challenges that were taking place. Well, now the FCC has opened that up to additional entities. You see here, the Broadband Data Act requires that the Commission create a process whereby information included in the fabric may be challenged by consumers, state, local, and tribal government entities, and other entities or individuals. So it does mention consumers and individuals, although I think this is not likely to be consumers and just any old individual. I don't think you or I, if you're not part of a government organization or or some other interest group like the Broadband Mapping Coalition or somebody like that, if you're not associated with that, but you are just like an individual, a consumer at home, I don't think you'd be going in and challenging the Fabric data. You will have your own opportunity starting tomorrow, is the date, when the data from the Broadband Data Fabric and the ISP data is all put together into the new FCC map that's supposed to be released tomorrow. And consumers will be able to look up their address and see what is supposed to be available there. It's supposed to show you, yes, which providers are providing service. It's supposed to show you what the maximum advertised download and upload speeds are. And you'll be able to challenge that if you see, well, wait a minute, I can't get service from this particular service provider. I've called and they say they can't get it to me. They say they'd have to charge me $10,000 to get the service from them. I can't get an installation in 10 days and they want to charge me this crazy setup fee. So you can challenge that. You can even challenge, it looks like you're going to be able to challenge whether the speeds that they're claiming they're delivering are actually available. Now, obviously, if you have, let's say you have service from AT&T and you've got their 200 megabit per second plan, but they also have a gig plan. You can't say they don't offer gig. You gotta have that plan to determine. I guess you could do speed tests and see what happens there. But again, I think you'll be able to challenge it. We'll know more tomorrow. I'm planning on, as soon as I see that maps up, I'm planning on doing a stream on that, maybe do a quick run-through demo of the map and show all the features in there. So that's coming. That, I think, is where the consumers and individuals will be able to challenge data. This is going to be a little bit more specific as to why you have an interest, other than being a consumer, why you would have an interest in challenging this. You can see here the task force made the Fabric data available to internet service providers in state, local, and tribal government entities starting on June 23rd, 2022. So they could submit broadband availability data prior to the close of the filing window, September 1st. Additionally, these entities were able to provide feedback on the initial production version of the Fabric through the bulk Fabric challenge process that commenced on September 12th. Yeah, so I have the dates right. So the bulk challenges started in September. Today, other entities and organizations may begin the process of obtaining a license to the Fabric, and that's why it's probably not going to be you and me as consumers, let's say. Now, you could be an internet service provider, somebody at an internet service provider that would be wanting to challenge this, obviously, but you already had your opportunity. So this is going to be more for, again, it's interest groups, the kinds of folks that would be doing this. That's because you see here, to access the Fabric data, each entity must register in the Commission Registration System, or CORS, log into the BDC system, and execute a limited end-user license agreement for the Fabric, depending on your organization type. For the Fabric, depending on your organization type, you may need to provide a brief description of how your use of the Fabric data aligns with BDC purposes and how your organization is involved in issues around broadband availability. So again, it seems like they're still wanting to restrict the access to the Fabric to those people that have a reason to have access to the Fabric. In other words, most of us, if we're a consumer, are just interested in our particular house, or maybe somebody that in our family, maybe an elderly parent or something like that. But we're basically going to be looking at one address at a time. We don't need to be doing bulk challenges. So that's going to be reserved for these interest groups now that, again, all the service providers have had a whack at it, and government organizations. Now you've got other stakeholders that can have access to this. There's a link here for a little bit more information about that. And then you see here, in addition to making Fabric data available to interested entities, the task force has also recently released documentation that describes the methodology used to create the initial production version of the Fabric. And it's really quite interesting what CostQuest had to do to be able to get this Fabric put together. The methods manual describes the biannual Fabric development process, including an overview of the Fabric data model and terminology, the mechanics of the Fabric production, and the output files provided to users. Licensees can obtain the methods manual through the CostQuest Help Center, and a public version is available for all interested stakeholders under the Key Reference Documents tab of the Resources section of the Broadband Data Collection webpage at this address there. You see, where's my mouse? There it is. See the URL right there. And this is where they're talking about. So as a consumer, I guess you're an interested party because you can actually go up here, and as they say, there's a link to this page, and then if you go into the key references documents, you'll see here fabric documentation and bulk challenge specification, and you can click on that right there, and when you do, there it is. You pull up that Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric, the methods manual. It's fairly lengthy. Lots of information in here, so obviously I'm not going to go through this, but again, it's pretty interesting. I've seen video presentations on how this fabric was created and how they went through to try to identify all of the homes. And unlike, they really are trying in the fabric. They're really trying to pinpoint the dead center of a location. I don't know why. They've got something here in the street, so I don't know if this is an actual. What do we have here? That's fabric inactive and fabric active. So I don't know what that's about. These red ones here, but you see every dot is as much as possible centered in the middle of that structure. And this is obviously, again, a residential area where you expect all of these structures would be broadband serviceable. What else do we have here? I saw another image or two. Lots of stuff. This is good weekend reading if you want to check it out there. So more information on how they do this. And then again, you've got areas that are kind of like this that are going to be more rural, where you're having to identify particular structures. Maybe they're saying this is not one because there's no green dot on there, and somehow they determine that. I don't know. It looks like it could be to me. But again, they looked at satellite imagery, and based on the folks at CostQuest going through, let's see here. I'm seeing some chat stuff pop up, but it's things that should not be in there. So based on CostQuest going through and doing satellite imagery, and then again, kind of training their software, so they would go in and look at areas and manually say, okay, this looks right, this looks right, this looks right, based on roof lines, those kinds of things, and then used a lot of artificial intelligence to try to fill in the gaps. So we know there's issues with the fabric, so that's why this map that's coming out tomorrow is the preliminary map. It's not going to be used by the NTIA to determine unserved and underserved areas. They're going to go through another development of a fabric based on all the challenges and all of the consumer input that's going to be coming once consumers get into the map. And from there, there'll be a new fabric developed. And then once that new fabric is developed, then internet service providers again will upload their serviceable locations, the locations that they serve, on top of that fabric. And then the new maps will come out after that. And then this is going to be a biannual process, because it's going to be changing. It's a moving target. You're going to have new locations all the time. You're going to have changes in speeds that broadband service providers, as they maybe upgrade speeds, as they change plans, their max speeds and download speeds will change. So it's going to be a moving target. There's going to be new providers that are coming in that are not here today that are going to have to be in the fabric. So it's changing, and every 6 months this will be new, and every 6 months or so the FCC map will be changing, where you can look up at your address and you're going to see the new data there. So that is coming. And then again tomorrow we will be seeing the FCC map. So again, at some point tomorrow, I'm going to go live with a preview of the new FCC map, and I will walk through that. So if you're not subscribed, go ahead and click the subscribe button, click the bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. And I'm live every day with Broadband Deployment News, or Tech Tuesday on Tuesdays, generally every day. So make sure you're subscribed, click the bell, and you'll be notified. And thanks a lot. I will see you tomorrow, hopefully. Well, anticipating that the new FCC map will be out, and I'll walk through it then. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.